screen opens to darkness, and then a single light, a photograph of a man's face, weathered, intelligent, and utterly unafraid. The kind of face that has seen people betray him and learned not just to survive it, but to understand it so completely that he could predict it before it happened. This is not a story about being good at games. This is a story about what happens when you stop playing by rules that everyone else already broke. Most of us grow up believing in reciprocity. We're taught that if you're honest, people will be honest with you. If you're kind, kindness returns. If you play fair, others will too. It's a beautiful lie, and it works perfectly in a world that doesn't exist. Because the moment you step into any arena where something actually matters, whether it's business, politics, relationships, or even simple social dynamics, you encounter people who understood something you didn't. They understood that the game was never about fairness. The game was about power. And once you realize the rules have already been bent by everyone around you, the question becomes not whether you should bend them too, but how to bend them with intelligence, precision, and a clarity of purpose that most people will never achieve. Niccolo Machiavelli was a man who lived in the shadow of violence. Florence in the early 1500s was not a gentle place. It was a city consumed by the machinations of powerful families, by the constant calculation of advantage, by the brutal understanding that sentiment and virtue were luxuries only the defeated could afford. He watched princes rise and fall. He watched men who were genuinely good lose everything to men who understood that goodness was a tool, not a principle. And he watched men who were ruthless but stupid lose to men who were ruthless and clever. From all of this observation, Machiavelli wrote something that changed how we understand power forever. He wrote essentially a manual for people who had finally decided to stop losing. The fundamental insight that runs through everything Machiavelli taught is this: the world is not divided into good people and bad people. It's divided into people who understand how power actually works and people who pretend it works the way they wish it did. And when those two groups collide, there is never really any doubt about who wins. The person operating on delusion will lose to the person operating on reality almost every single time. But here's where it gets interesting, and where Machiavelli becomes not just historically important, but viscerally relevant to your life right now. In this moment, dealing with people who have already decided that the old rules don't apply to them. Machiavelli never said to be evil. This is crucial. He never advocated for cruelty for its own sake, or dishonesty just because it felt powerful. What he actually said was far more dangerous than that, because it was true. He said that the appearance of virtue is more important than virtue itself. He said that you should be willing to break a promise if keeping it would harm you, and everyone else does the same. He said that people fear the strong and respect the strong, and they pity the weak and despise the weak almost unconsciously. And most importantly, he said that if you're dealing with someone who has already decided to play dirty, your morality doesn't protect you. It just ensures you lose. Let me tell you about a woman named Catherine. She was brilliant, genuinely talented, and she believed in doing good work and letting it speak for itself. She worked at a company where there was a promotion coming up. It was the kind of promotion that changes your life. Better pay, better title, better security. She and one other person were in contention for it. The other person was a man named Marcus. Marcus was competent, but Catherine was better at the actual work. Everyone knew it. What Catherine didn't know was that Marcus had already started laying groundwork weeks earlier. He was in the CEO's ear at lunch, talking about leadership in ways that subtly contrasted his own decisive style with Catherine's collaborative approach. He was reframing collaboration as indecision. He was telling people in the office that Catherine was brilliant, but might not be ready for the pressure of the new role. He was creating doubt not through lies exactly, but through a careful selection of which truths to emphasize and which truths to ignore. Catherine, meanwhile, was doing her job. She was creating exceptional work. She was being kind to her colleagues. She was being honest in meetings. She was operating under the assumption that excellence and honesty and effort would be seen and rewarded. And they were seen. But seeing is not the same as valuing. Marcus wasn't attacking Catherine's excellence. He was reframing what excellence meant. He was planting seeds. He was creating a narrative in which Catherine was technically skilled, but strategically questionable. And when the promotion was given to Marcus, shocking to everyone, but especially to Catherine, she suddenly understood something that changed everything. She had been playing chess while Marcus played poker, and poker was what the game actually was. This is where Machiavelli becomes not a moral lesson, but a survival manual, because Catherine had a choice at that moment. She could have continued to believe in the system. She could have assumed that this was a fluke, that eventually good work would be recognized, that the world was fundamentally fair and would right itself. Many people make that choice, and they spend years or decades wondering why the playing field never seems to level. Or she could have looked at what Marcus did and learned from it, not to become Marcus, not to start lying and backstabbing, but to understand that the rules of the game were different from what she'd been told. And if she wanted to win, she had to play the actual game, not the theoretical one. Machiavelli's insight was that power operates on its own logic, completely separate from morality. A prince doesn't become powerful because he's good. He becomes powerful because he understands the people he's dealing with, because he anticipates their moves, because he controls the narrative around him, and because he's willing to do what needs to be done when the moment comes. The confusion happens because we expect these two things to be connected. We expect that power follows from goodness. But the world doesn't work that way. The world works so that power follows from understanding, from strategic thinking, from clarity, and from a willingness to see people and situations as they actually are, instead of as we wish they were. Think about every situation in your life where someone treated you unfairly. Go back and examine it, not from the perspective of, they were wrong and I was right, but from the perspective of, what did they understand about the situation that I didn't? What move did they see coming that I didn't anticipate? Where was I operating on good faith while they were operating on calculation? Almost universally, you'll find that the person who wronged you saw something more clearly than you did. They might have been more cynical, but they were more accurate. They understood that your good intentions weren't a shield. They understood that the person who controls the narrative wins, not the person who tells the truth. They understood that appearing strong is more important than being kind. Now here's where people usually get Machiavelli completely wrong. They think he's advocating for ruthlessness and cruelty. But read what he actually wrote, and you find something much more interesting. He said that a prince should seem merciful, honest, humane, and faithful. He should appear to have all the good qualities, but internally he should be willing to abandon them if necessary. The point isn't to be evil. The point is to understand that the appearance of virtue is what matters in the world, not virtue itself. You need to control what people believe about you far more carefully than you need to actually be what they believe. This is not cynicism. This is clarity. This is the difference between operating on what you wish reality was and operating on what reality actually is. Let's say you're in a negotiation with someone. They want something from you, and you want something from them. Machiavelli would tell you this: don't go in trying to find a fair deal. Go in understanding exactly what leverage you have and exactly what leverage they have. Understand what they actually need versus what they say they need. Understand what they're willing to walk away from and what they aren't. Understand the best alternative they have to a deal with you, and then position yourself so that walking away from you is more painful than accepting your terms. This isn't dirty. This is just leverage. This is how the world actually works. Everyone does this. The only question is whether you do it consciously and skillfully or unconsciously and clumsily. There was a man named David who worked in sales. He was honest. He was a good person. He would tell clients about the genuine limitations of his products, and he would help them find solutions, even if the solution wasn't his product. He believed in building real relationships, and he was consistently outperformed by a woman named Sandra, who had no such scruples. Sandra would tell clients whatever they wanted to hear. She would promise delivery timelines that were impossible. She would claim features the product didn't have. She would get the deal done and then deal with the consequences later. She was a shark, and she made 3 times what David made. David hated this. He hated watching someone dishonest succeed while he struggled. But here's what he missed, and here's where Machiavelli comes in. Sandra wasn't actually succeeding because she was dishonest. She was succeeding because she understood something about how the game was played. She understood that in a sales environment, the person who sounds most confident and most certain wins. She understood that most people don't verify what you're telling them. She understood that the fear of losing a deal is more powerful than the desire to find a truly good solution. She was playing the game as it actually was, not as it should be, and she was winning because of that clarity. David eventually figured this out, but instead of becoming like Sandra, he did something smarter. He stayed honest, but he became strategic about what parts of the truth he emphasized and when. He would still tell clients about limitations, but he would frame them as challenges that his superior service could overcome. He would still be truthful about delivery times, but he would position himself as the reliable choice in a market full of overpromisers. He learned to control the narrative without lying. He learned to emphasize his strengths without denigrating his competitors directly. He learned to make people want to work with him not just because the product was good, but because he had positioned himself as trustworthy in a marketplace full of people who weren't. He became as effective as Sandra, but he did it by understanding the game and playing it skillfully rather than just playing dirtier. This is what Machiavelli is really teaching you. It's not a lesson in corruption, it's a lesson in clarity. When you stop pretending the world works the way you wish it did and start understanding how it actually works, everything changes. You stop being naive. You stop being blindsided. You stop wondering why good people fail and bad people succeed. You understand that the answer is usually that the bad people understood the game better. They saw the leverage points. They understood what people actually wanted versus what they said they wanted. They moved before being moved. They created facts on the ground. They didn't win because they were evil. They won because they were awake. The thing about playing dirty against someone who's playing by old rules is that it works almost effortlessly. But what happens when everyone else wakes up? What happens when the person you're dealing with has also read Machiavelli? What happens when they understand that the game is played on a different level than the one you thought you were playing on? Well, now you need to be not just willing to play dirty, but intelligent about it. You need to understand that there are layers to the game. There's what people see on the surface, and there are the actual moves being made underneath. Machiavelli understood that you need to master both levels simultaneously. Consider the concept of fear versus love. Machiavelli noted that if you can't have both, fear is more reliable. People love inconsistently. They forgive inconsistently. They show up inconsistently if they love you but don't fear you. But fear is reliable. Fear makes people careful. Fear makes them predictable. This sounds cruel, and it is cruel, but it's also true. And understanding this truth doesn't mean you need to be cruel. It means you understand that in any relationship or dynamic where you have power, the person you're dealing with will respect power far more than they respect kindness. So if you want to be treated well, you need to be worth treating well. You need to be someone it's costly to cross. But here's where it gets interesting, and where people who understand Machiavelli often make their greatest mistakes. They assume that because fear is more reliable than love, they should simply be feared. They become that person who gets their way through intimidation or threats or controlling information or making people uncomfortable. And yes, this works for a while, but it works only as long as they maintain absolute power. The moment that power slips, they're destroyed, because everyone they've alienated and frightened will move against them. Whereas the person who combines real competence with strategic generosity, who is both feared and admired, who can make people want to help them, not just because they're afraid, but because they see genuine advantage in it, that person's power becomes almost unshakable. Think of it this way. If you rule through fear alone, you create enemies who hide their enmity. They smile to your face and work against you behind your back. They're looking for any opportunity to bring you down. But if you rule through a combination of power and perceived benefit, if people actually believe that working with you helps them, then you have something more valuable than loyalty. You have something that looks like loyalty, but is actually self-interest, which is far more durable. This is the deepest insight of Machiavelli that most people miss. He wasn't just saying to be ruthless. He was saying to be ruthless only to the extent necessary to maintain your position, and then to create conditions where people want to maintain that position for you, because doing so benefits them. There's a CEO named Richard who built a company that became incredibly successful. And in the early years, Richard had to do some ruthless things. He had to push people who weren't performing out of the company. He had to make decisions that hurt people in the short term, but strengthened the organization overall. He had to sometimes lie to board members about what he was planning, because if they knew, they would have stopped him from making moves that ultimately saved the company. But Richard also understood something crucial. Once you've created power and position, you don't need to keep playing the same way. In fact, playing the same way would undermine your position. So Richard started being generous. He paid people well, often above market rate. He trusted his team with real authority in decision-making. He was transparent about the company's actual state, good news and bad. He became someone people wanted to work for, not someone they feared working for. And this was strategic too. Richard understood that people who work for you because they want to will innovate and push and think in ways that people who work for you because they're afraid never will. He understood that his company was in a complex industry where success depended on creative problem solving and real ownership. He understood that you can't get that from fear, so he created a system where people had real stake in the outcome, where their success was tied to the company's success, where they knew they were valued. This wasn't kindness, though it might have looked that way. It was clarity. It was understanding that at a certain scale and complexity, the leverage points shift. Fear works for simple obedience, but genuine success requires engagement, and engagement requires that people see real benefit in what they're doing. This is where Machiavelli really shines, because he understood that principles of power aren't static. They shift based on context. The moves that work when you're struggling to establish yourself are different from the moves that work when you're maintaining an established position. The tactics that work in a direct confrontation are different from the tactics that work in a long-term relationship. The way you motivate fear is different from the way you inspire loyalty. A true student of Machiavelli doesn't just apply the same principles everywhere. They understand the environment they're operating in and calibrate their approach accordingly. Let me tell you about a situation that happens again and again, and understanding how Machiavelli would approach it can save you years of grief. You have a friend or a colleague or a family member. You trust them, and at some point you realize they betrayed that trust. Maybe they spread something you told them in confidence. Maybe they took credit for your work. Maybe they made a deal with you and then broke it. Your instinct is usually to confront them, to express hurt, to try to make them understand how much this has hurt you. You're appealing to their conscience. You're appealing to the relationship. You're hoping that if they truly understand the impact of what they did, they'll feel bad and make it right. But here's what you need to understand from Machiavelli's perspective. They already know what they did hurt you. They probably knew it would, and they did it anyway. That tells you something crucial about how they operate. They're not acting from misunderstanding. They're acting from calculation. They weighed the benefit to themselves against the cost to you and decided the benefit was worth it. Now your appeal to conscience and relationship assumes they care more about those things than they care about whatever they gain by betraying you. And if they did, they wouldn't have done it in the first place. So your approach is fundamentally broken. You're negotiating as if you're dealing with someone who operates on conscience, when you're actually dealing with someone who operates on calculation.